series on how to measure a room. In this part, you're going to learn how to take some overall basic measurements of a room. Hi everyone, it's Carol from Discover Interior Design, and I'm so glad you're here. Well, grab your tape measure and join me as we get started on measuring a room. Before we start, I want to let you know that I recommend using a tape measure to measure your room because I feel like you can get some really great details of the exact measurements that you want. But you can also use a digital laser tape measure, and I think there are even some cool apps on your phone that you can use to help measure. So that's up to you, but I'll be using a tape measure as an example. When you're measuring a room, it's helpful to break it down into two different steps. The first step is to zoom out and measure the overall dimensions of the room. The second step is an optional step where we can kind of zoom in and measure other features as needed. So step one just means that we want to get the basics of knowing the overall size of a room. We want the width and the length of the room, which just means the perimeter or outline of the room. And think of the width as the side-to-side measurement and the length as the depth or the top-to-bottom measurement. And usually when you measure a room, you measure it using feet or meters because a room is larger. You could also measure it in inches, but I recommend measuring it in feet and then also in inches because your room is probably not perfectly 10 feet wide by 15 feet in length. It's probably 10 feet wide by 15 feet and 5 inches. So start out with feet and then use inches to get the smaller details. And of course, this applies to meters and centimeters. And one thing I recommend doing is just drawing a quick sketch of your room. It doesn't have to be perfect or anything, but that way you have a place to write down your measurements. And when you measure the width and length of a room, just measure from wall to wall. The other option is to measure along the floor from baseboard to baseboard. And then you just need to figure in and add in the depth of your baseboards to the overall measurements. And then when you have those measurements, then you can just jot them down on your little drawing. And if you want to just list the measurements of your room, what's the standard practice is to list the width first, then the length or how deep the room is. So as in this example. And then with this information, when you have the overall width and length of a room, you can use this information to find out, the overall square footage of a room or even the center of a room. And then in step two, we can kind of zoom in to gather some details around the room. And what we're looking for are built-in features around the perimeter of the room. So that means doors and openings and windows. And what we're looking for are the sizes of these features as well as their locations. And I recommend starting at one wall and then just go around the room in a clockwise fashion. And just starting from left to right on each wall. And we're just looking for the overall width of those features and the distance, so how much space there is from, say, a corner of a wall to where a door begins. And then, of course, the width of that door, and then how much space from that other side of the door to the other corner of the wall. And the standard way to measure windows and doors and all of these features that may be on the perimeter of the room is just to use inches because they're smaller than, say, the overall width of a wall. So for doors and windows and other openings, just measure the inside area. So that can mean the inside frame of a door or just the perimeter of a window. And then measure the distance between, say, a corner and the one side of a door or window, and then the distance between the other side of that window or door to the other corner of a wall. And then while you're at it, you may as well take the height of your windows and doors and just measure from the floor all the way to the highest point of the door or window. And one other measurement you may want to gather for a window is the distance between the floor and the lowest point of a window. And then if you want to get the depth of something, maybe you have a fireplace in that room, and it would be important to find out how deep the fireplace hearth goes into the room. So that's where you'd want to measure that depth, or finding out how far into the room a heating vent is located, or even a radiator. And then why would it be handy to have this information about the locations of doors and windows and anything else that's going on around the perimeter of the room? Well, one reason would be just to help you when you're planning your furniture layout. So you know where the doors are located and you know where you can place your furniture. Or maybe with a fireplace, you would want to know how deep that hearth was so that you knew where you could place an area rug, for instance. And knowing the height of the window is important when you want to hang draperies. And then when you have all three measurements, standard practice is to list the width first, followed by the height, followed by the depth. And then after gathering all this information, you can add this to your floor plan drawing. And then just to keep all that information handy, because you never know when you may need that in the future. So let me know if you have any questions about getting some overall measurements for a room, and if you have any suggestions for us on how to measure a room. Thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.